Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new story for humanity, part one, setting the table. All right, so I'm going to screen share and we're going to walk through this. So, new story for humanity. What would a new story for humanity contain, right? And any story, like, I've been involved with the media on a number of occasions, going back to high school when I was on news staff. But the elements of a story contain who, what, where, when, why, and how. So the 6 W's, though the last one starts with an H. And I say let's start with why. The why, and this is something that's kind of evolved. And by the way, when I say setting the table, now I'm going to start putting some stuff on the table. And what we put on the table, just imagine it doesn't have to be exactly what I'm writing. It could be very different, but we're just going to kind of start with filling out a story, and then we'll just go from there. But the why is very simple. We want to save, heal, and transform life on Earth from this arguably barbaric existence that prevails, is predominant on Earth right now, to a vastly more, I'm not going to say more, I'm just going to say to a compassionate existence. So that's the why. Now, the when is very clear. Now we are out of time and we got to do it. The where, really, there's both for the how and for the where. I'm going to and for the what, there are really going to, what I'm proposing is that there be a part one and a part two. A part one and a part two. A part one and a part two. Okay. And let's talk about the what, and then we'll talk about the where, and then we'll talk about the how, and then finally we'll talk about the who. Not the rock group that I used to listen to a lot when I was in middle school, but anyway, I know pretty much all the Who songs and I can sing them and all that. But anyway, the what, part one of the what is bringing humanity together. So here, let me just get clear on what I mean by part one and part two, because that's a recurring theme. So part one is, the way I see it, there's really two. So the two parts, I'm just going to come out and say it. No more beating around the bush. Part one is really about us getting together in the zoomosphere, right? It's about conversations, and it's about coming to agreement of, how are we going to achieve? It's about coming to an agreement about how, about why, even about where, what, and everything else, right? But it's all in the zoomosphere. It's what we're doing right now. This is part one. Part two is once we figured out the part one part, this is about the physical world. This is about, okay, let's go ahead and set up, food healers, community cafes at this park at this time, and we're going to feed this food. Now we're going to get the food from these places. So it's all about the physical, right? Part one, if I had to use a word for all that, I would basically call it the virtual, right? So we first meet in the virtual, then we go to the physical. So the what first involves bringing humanity together, and essentially coming to agreement on all this stuff, right? Once we've come to agreement, then, the what in terms of the part two in the physical world, right? One second, I just got to pause recording for a second. All right, so we were talking about the what of the who, what, where, when, why, and how. The what, and there's two whats. One is bringing humanity together so that we can converse in the virtual, and part two is the physical. What are we doing in the physical? For example, feeding everyone with community cafes, etc. And then also in the physical doing solar radiation management, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll get much more specific about all that in the upcoming segments, since this is a multi-part series. And the where, again, part one in the virtual, where are we meeting? Are we meeting on Zoom and yada, yada? And then the part two is like, where are we building the community cafes? Where are we doing the SRM, et cetera? And likewise with the how. Now, this is a really interesting part. For the how, for part one, for the virtual, how are we coming together to come into agreement and work together and dialogue and all that? And as we'll see, that's very much in the realm of collective intelligence. How are we going to, bring all of our minds and hearts and creativity and everything together? The how in the physical world includes collective intelligence, because collective intelligence is always there, whether we're rolling out community cafes or solar radiation management, arrays of mirrors or whatever. There's always collective intelligence. It's just that part one is kind of purely in the virtual, the digital, if you will, and then part two gets into the physical. All right, so with that, are there any questions or comments? All right, so let's wrap up this recording and get ready for the next part. All right, this concludes part one of this series, which is setting the table. And get ready for part two, 3-course meal. Make it plant-based. Coming right up.